Dan Bahl with you just a little after 11 o'clock here on Sunday, July the 20th, 2025. Joining us now on the line here on WEEI, host of What Chaos, the national hockey show on the All City Network, as well as a contributor on CBS Sports. Pete Blackburn joins the program. Pete, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be able to catch up with you. I know it's the middle of July, so hockey isn't probably number one on the list of topics for many, but it's been a fascinating offseason for the Bruins to this point, Pete. And before we get into everything that they did, the good, the bad, and the ugly in free agency, to go back to where they were at the trade deadline this year, it was a pretty definitive path that was taken by Don Sweeney and company in terms of where they went with their D-build. Were you on board with the way that they went through their trade deadline and their decision to kind of start things over?
Yeah, I mean, the only one that I didn't really love was the Marchand trade for a number of reasons, like the return, going to Florida, and moving off of your captain. Like, who's leading this team? Who's the clear number one leader on this team heading into this year now? And I still think the answer to that is pretty undefined. Like, the obvious choices would be a Pasternak or a McAvoy, but like those guys have never had to be the number one guy and the true voice in the room. So like that question I think still remains. But I mean, given where they were in the standings and given the assets that they had and like a clear need to adjust and sort of retool on the fly, I think they did pretty well to get value from the assets that they had.
I am curious. Were you on the side that was rooting for Marchand during the playoff run?
I was, yeah. I mean, like the trade is done, and I'm not going to hold it against him. I love the guy for everything that he did here, and I'm always going to root for him. He's one of my favorite players, personalities. So when he made it that far, I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's just ride it out with Florida and see what happens.
There were a lot of people in the fan base that were looking at it just from the fact that he had the Florida logo on his chest and going, well, I can't root for that, but. Personally, I was right there with you. He brought so much to the city and to the team and just in terms of both on and off the ice that I couldn't reconcile with that. Even if maybe you didn't want Florida to do amazing, you still wanted the guy to succeed and potentially get another cup with how much he brought, at least for me.
Yeah, I can understand both sides of it. Like, I can understand wanting Marchand's like team success and Stanley Cup success to be contained within the Bruins, just to kind of, make sure that he's remembered as a Bruin. Like right now, given Florida's outlook and what they could be over the next handful of years, like he's on track to probably win more Stanley Cups with Florida than he ever did with the Bruins, which is kind of wild. But, at the same time, what he was with the Bruins is not going to be forgotten. And, I can understand why people might have a distaste seeing him in a different uniform. But what's done is done. He's wearing that uniform, and I'm not going to root against him because of it.
Yeah, multiple cups as a Panther kind of turns my stomach a little bit, but that's okay. He brought enough where he can earn it. But before we get back to the Bruins, as you talk about the Panthers and their outlook, the Eastern Conference around the Boston Bruins, how do you see the power dynamics setting up in the next few years coming up?
Yeah, it feels like a changing of the guard a little bit, and I think there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, the Maple Leafs, they lost Mitch Marner, and we'll see what happens to them without him. But, I mean, like the Panthers are clearly the class, not only in the Atlantic, but just the Eastern Conference, and I think that they're pretty well above like the next tier. You saw even, the second best team in the Eastern Conference this year was the Carolina Hurricanes, and Florida just made easy work of them in the Eastern Conference final. So, I think that it's Florida's conference and then everybody else below them, and maybe Florida takes a step backwards after these long runs, but we'll see. The Bruins are sliding down. I think the Canadiens are sliding up. I really like what they've been able to do in the direction that they're headed. I still think Carolina and New Jersey have something to prove. Columbus took a big step forward. Really like the teams that really have kind of held solid, consistent spots near the top of the Eastern Conference for the past, like much of the past decade. You're talking about like the Bruins, you're talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins. Those are two of the saddest and bleakest outlooks in the Eastern Conference right now. So I do think this is an opportunity for some new teams and some new blood to slide in and claim their place.
And it also seems like year over year, as the East, which was just a powerhouse for so long, like you talked about, Bruins, Penguins, Capitals are kind of going through their rebuild on the fly, but the Rangers, you don't know how long their window's open any longer. As that's gone on, Pete, the West seems like it just continues to grow in strength year over year.
Definitely. Like when we were going through our, top 10 scariest teams in the league last year, heading into the playoffs, most of those teams were coming out of the Western Conference. Like the gauntlet of the first couple of rounds in the Western Conference playoffs eliminated several teams that I think were Stanley Cup caliber. Yeah. And I look at the Colorado Avalanche, I look at the Vegas Golden Knights, even the LA Kings. They imploded in the first round against the Oilers again. But like Edmonton, LA, Vegas, Colorado, Dallas, Winnipeg, even Minnesota is emerging. Like all of those teams are stronger than most teams in the Eastern Conference, I would say. With the exception of Florida, maybe you want to throw Carolina in there. Maybe you throw in Toronto if you believe in the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is a fool's errand. But, I do think there are so many teams in the Western Conference that are built for the playoffs and built for, Stanley Cup contention more so than the Eastern Conference.
The voice you're hearing, that of Pete Blackburn, host of What Chaos on the All City Network. Subscribe on YouTube as well as wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow him on Twitter if you haven't already, at Pete Blackburn. Back to the Bruins for just a moment, starting with the draft. What did you make of the way that they fared in this year's draft? They had a pick at number 7 that you don't really see the Bruins get very often in this era, but did you like what they came away with overall?
Absolutely. I think they did great in the draft, and I love the Higgins pick. There's such good value at number 7, a guy who a year ago was, considered to be a potential number 1 pick, and, he has by his own standards, a disappointing season at BC, but not a bad season whatsoever. I love the value that they found in Higgins there, and at a position of need, I don't think you could ask for much more. I don't know a ton about the guys that were taken behind Higgins, but based off of the people that I've talked to who watch these guys regularly and study the tape, like they think that the Bruins had one of the better drafts in the NHL this year, which is a really, really nice and encouraging sign for a team that has not done amazing in the draft by any means over the past decade or so. And when you're looking at a transition year right now, in a really important rebuilding summer, hitting in the draft is the number 1 step and the first step to getting that back on track. So that part was very encouraging.
I'm curious at your opinion on the Neely Sweeney regime going into this year's free agency. Not right now, because that may have changed a little bit, because I felt pretty good about the way that they were orchestrating this. I guess you could maybe call it retool with the moves they made at the deadline, the way they went through the draft. Where did you fall on those two in the direction of the Bruins coming out of the draft?
Coming out of the draft, I was impressed, and I thought that was a really important draft for that regime. Would I have allowed them the chance to draft in that spot? I don't know if I would have landed there. I had some questions, and if they decided to go in a different direction front office wise, I think that it would have been explicable and it would have made sense. But they stuck with those guys, and apparently they have a vision, and as long as they're able to execute on it, then that's great. But I have some concerns about the directions that they took after the draft, and I have some questions about what they really plan on being and what the true and honest goal of this year's team is. Because if you ask Don Sweeney and if you ask Cam Neely, even in the press conference they had, about a month ago, there seemed to be a disconnect, at least in the messaging of what they plan to be this season. Do they plan on, using this as a finding out year? Do they plan on having this be sort of a bridge year? Or do they really truly believe that they can contend? Because if they believe that they can contend, I have a lot of questions. But if they do believe that this is a bridge year, I think that's fine. There are teams that have to go through bridge years, and the Bruins have had a ton of success in the Eastern Conference over, the past decade plus, more so than many other teams. So if they need to use a year or two to bridge to that next chapter, then I think that that's reasonable. But they have to keep the eyes on the prize. And I think that fans are hungry for an honest explanation of where they believe they're at right now.
It's a great point because of any team in the Eastern Conference, maybe even in all of the NHL over the last 10, 15 years, if there's a team that tried to win, had teams that were capable of winning, and have reached the point where you do need to go through the retool that every team in sports needs to go through at some point or another, the Bruins were justified in doing that. So I was right there with you with the way they went through free agency. What were the moves that you at least could tolerate, and what were the moves that frustrated you most?
Well, I mean, I can tolerate all of the moves. There was no move in a vacuum that I would say, oh, my God, what are they doing here? Sure. It's really the price of Tanner Jeannot is the one that stands out to me. When you go after a player like Tanner Jeannot, who has value, I'm not saying that Tanner Jeannot stinks. He is a bottom six player. He has not hit the ceiling that he set for himself several years ago in Nashville, which was a blip on the radar. He's not even come close to matching that type of season. And maybe the Bruins are banking on them being able to unlock something in him to get closer to that year that he had with Nashville. But, Tampa paid a premium. LA paid a bit of a premium to, make that bet, and he failed in both of those spots. And now I feel like the Bruins are also paying a premium, not only in the term, but also on the AAV. Both the term and the AAV went above expected and projected for Tanner Jeannot. And I don't think that they needed to be the team that made that bet and paid for that bet, because I think that a player like Tanner Jeannot is better suited for a team like the Carolina Hurricanes, because he can be the final piece and really an identity changer and give them something that they don't already have in their DNA to put them over the top. Tanner Jeannot is not going to put the Bruins over the top, and I don't think that they need to make the commitment that they made to him on July 1st. When they've got so many other needs to address first. We've seen so many times in the NHL that building from the back end forward is not a route to success.
Right.
You need to fill your top six spots way before thinking about your bottom six and what that's going to be, because you're not going to win games on your bottom six, and you're not going to become a playoff team based off your bottom six. So that's really where my problem was that they just overextended themselves for a player that didn't make a ton of sense right now.
And not to say that these guys are going to be top six forwards, slam dunk guys as part of your top six moving forward, but I also view a signing of a Jeannot and the return of a Sean Corrali, guys in that ilk of a bottom six forward, as potential blocks for a Fraser Minton or a Matt Patra. Because for the first time in a few years, it seems like you have a few young guys who actually have some potential to be parts of your scoring group moving forward. So I just worry that it takes ice time and minutes away from guys who actually have some top six potential.
Yeah, that and also, like, when you're talking about the longer term outlook, yeah, Tanner Jeannot's 3-point whatever it is AAV is not going to be like super ugly on a page, especially with the cap going up. But when you're paying, a premium relative to a bottom six role, it can handicap you a little bit in your pursuit of other players down the line. Like, it makes it harder to overpay for a guy who may have a bigger impact in a top six role if you want to overpay that guy, which I think makes a lot more sense in free agency, because that's how you get those players, and those players have more of an impact on a nightly basis. So, again, it's not the end of the world, but it's just not amazing business. Like, if you wanted to pay Tanner Jeannot $4 or $5 million a year for 2 years, go ahead, because
right.
2 years, what are you going to be in that 2 year window? You're probably not going to be a Stanley Cup contender. But so you can overpay those guys who help change the culture and help protect some of the other guys that you may want to protect around, like a Fraser Minton or a James Higgins. So, like, I don't have a problem with the player. I don't have a problem with them overextending. It's just more the overextension on both the term and the money.
He is Pete Blackburn joining us here on WEEI. Pete, before we let you go, what can you tell us about the What Chaos show and what we're expecting moving forward?
What Chaos will be back to a daily show on YouTube and on podcast platforms once hockey season ramps up. So that'll be like training camp and throughout the regular season. We go daily Monday through Thursday, and it's just a fun show that likes to have a little fun with hockey, highlight the personalities, highlight some of the absurdity, and also break down the game as best we can. So it's a fun show, and we have a great time doing it. So you can find us on YouTube and find us on podcast platforms.
Love it. Make sure you subscribe and also follow Pete and the show across all social medias. Pete, thank you for the time this morning. Much appreciated, and hopefully we can do it again real soon.